Hi, I'm Chris Ralph, and I'm here to talk to you today about hard rock gold and why you should want to know more about hard rock gold. This is the gold that occurs in the original form, the hard rock veins and that sort of thing. And the reason is, why you should want to know is because of pockets. Yes, some of the best finds being made today by prospectors are rich pockets of hard rock gold at the surface. Literally, these hard rock pockets can produce tens, sometimes hundreds, and even once in a while, even thousands of ounces of gold. And if that isn't worth going after, well, I don't know what is. So you should want to know about hard rock gold. Now, even though I know that most prospectors are interested chiefly in nuggets and flakes and other placer gold that's been loosed from its original hard rock host. But knowing a little bit more about hard rock gold is going to make you a better prospector. So, don't put it off. Sit down with me and listen to this video. And I'll tell you what, when we get further on in the video, I'm going to talk a lot more about those pockets of gold, how they occur, where they occur, and the kind of places that you might look for them. So stay tuned. We're going to get to that in just a minute. Now, I'm going to start with the real secret of hard rock gold, and that's that almost all gold, and this is something that prospectors often don't think about, almost all deposits valued mostly for their gold occur in they are formed by hot, sulfury solutions deep in the earth. Now, you're going to say to me, Chris, you're kind of crazy because gold doesn't dissolve in water. And you're right. If you went to the tap at your house and got a cup of water and put a gold ring in it and let it sit overnight, that gold ring is not going to dissolve in the water. But if you take superheated water, say 400 or 500 degrees Fahrenheit, and you add some sulfur to that water, and you keep it under pressure, because at 400 or 500 degrees it's going to boil unless you have it under full pressure. You keep it in full pressure and add that sulfur in there and have it be a little bit acidic. Yeah, you'll find, surprise, gold will dissolve in waters like that. And that is the chemistry, the basic concept of pretty much all gold deposits, or at least deposits valued mostly for their gold. Now, I brought you out here today to the Tonopah area in central Nevada because I wanted to show you something. You see those hills behind me? That's a known resource for gold. Those roads all over it are drill roads, and this deposit has been drilled out and analyzed, and they know how much gold is there, and it's actually a little bit more than 200,000 ounces. Now you'll say to yourself, well, 200,000 ounces? Why aren't they out there with trucks and front end loaders just mining the heck out of that hill? Well, there's more to the story, and that's that it's pretty low grade. Now, it's not that the gold isn't there, but it's low in grade, and it's kind of dispersed, and it's kind of fine gold. The particles of gold are really small, and so when you look at mining something like that, I got to tell you, actually most big mining companies aren't interested in large low-grade deposits that are less than 1 million ounces. And 200,000, of course, is a lot less than 1 million. But there are some other deposits nearby, and the company that owns it is looking at the possibility of kind of mining them all in conjunction. But the gold isn't coarse, which is why you don't see prospectors out there with metal detectors and that sort of thing looking for gold that's out there. The gold is in tiny particles that would have to be mined with cyanide to extract the gold. So this deposit, just here outside of Tonopah, is an epithermal deposit. And epithermal is one of the types that I want to talk to you about. Epithermal deposits are deposits formed near the surface, and they come in basically two flavors. One is what they call low sulfidation epithermal. That means it has less sulfur. And high sulfidation, which plainly means it has more sulfur. And so you get more sulfide minerals associated with high sulfidation epithermal systems. Tonopah in this area, and including this hill, is a low sulfidation epithermal, meaning there's some sulfides, but not huge amounts. Now, Tonopah has produced millions of ounces of gold. And like I say, showing you this hill behind me, there's still more here left to be had. Now, a few miles down the road, some tens of miles down the road, is the town of Goldfield. And the Goldfield district, from its name, was a producer of gold. And Goldfield actually produced over 4 million ounces of gold back in the early days. And Goldfield is a high sulfidation epithermal system, and there's a lot of sulfides in the rock there. You can tell when you get into town, you can see the piles have, you can see just looking at the mine dumps that there's a lot of sulfides in them. But we're going to do some further video about Goldfield in the future, so stay tuned for that one too, but it's upcoming. But anyway, there's these two flavors of epithermal systems, and both can produce coarse gold and pockets that would be of interest to the individual prospector. It just matters how these veins and deposits form. And so let's talk about some other ones. Another one is the orogenic type system. Orogenic means like it's the same kind of deposit as the mother lode system. Orogenic just means it's related to mountain building. And mountain building type systems include the mother lode, but it also includes greenstone type deposits. And greenstone is what I found gold in when I was in Africa and also when I was in Western Australia. And there's some greenstone systems in Arizona and even some in the mother lode country. And so greenstone is an important one of the orogenic type systems. And then another one of the important orogenics is the banded iron formations. Now, banded iron is thick layers of iron oxides, and these aren't all that common in the United States, although worldwide they're important. The big important one in the United States is the Black Hills of South Dakota and the Homestake mine. That was a banded iron formation type of gold deposit. And so you have banded iron, greenstone, and then the mother lode or slate belt type of orogenic. And all of these can produce some really coarse gold that are of interest to the prospector. And so, and coarse nuggets, like I found a nugget in Africa, and I found nuggets in Australia. And so these places are good places to prospect. Okay, so that's a couple of systems. And other kinds of systems include the porphyry or related skarn and replacement types of deposits. Now, porphyries are actually best known as big, huge copper deposits, and a lot of the biggest copper deposits in the United States are a porphyry type system. But it's very common. Actually, first of all, there are porphyries, there are some in the United States that are gold rich, that actually have some copper but a lot of gold. So that's another kind of part of the porphyry group. But related to that are what they call skarn and replacement type deposits, where these happen where the porphyry, the hot porphyry rock, comes into contact with limestone, and sometimes it will change the limestone and recrystallize it. That's your skarn type deposit. And then sometimes if the solutions that are associated, the water solutions associated with the porphyry are right, they will actually eat into the limestone and dissolve it and then deposit minerals in that way. It's actually very common that in the periphery around porphyry deposits there are coarse gold and pockets that prospectors would be interested in. And in fact, some of the porphyry deposits in the United States were first discovered as nugget deposits. The prospectors that came out there first found gold, and then later, as they were looking into more detail, well, what about this area? You know, they found the copper. So even though the copper is actually bigger, usually much larger system than the gold that surrounds it. So that's the porphyry and skarn and replacement type hard rock systems that can be rich in gold. But then there's another that's called the Carlin system. Now the Carlin type systems are big here in Nevada, and there's not as many of them elsewhere in the world. Actually, even throughout the world, there's not as many as there are here in Nevada. But Nevada kind of has just the right conditions, and there are a number of really huge mines here in Nevada that are mining on the Carlin type system, and they literally produce millions of ounces per year in total from all these different big mines. So they can produce an incredible amount of gold. The systems can be incredibly huge, and they also are related to hot water that contains gold within it and some sulfur. And then basically what happens with Carlin type systems, the water circulates along fault zones, and sometimes it's mostly just the fault zones. Sometimes it eats into layers of limestone or dolomite related rocks and deposits in there. So again, all these systems are hot water related. Another type that I want to mention too, and the gold from Carlin is really small. They're famous for having microscopic sized gold. And in fact, the Carlin systems weren't discovered at all until the 1930s, and they really didn't become big at all until the 60s. And the reason why was because old-time prospectors would come out there. If they tested a stream that ran through a Carlin deposit, they would test it and find no gold at all because it's microscopic. You can't see it, and panning it won't really concentrate it properly. So that's the Carlin type systems. Other types include volcanogenic massive sulfides, and these are a high sulfur system that form with the black smokers. If you've ever seen video of that on the internet or on TV, the black smokers at the bottom of the ocean, that smoke is actually sulfide minerals. And as it continues to emit this black smoke over on the ocean floor over a long period of time, that sulfide smoke will accumulate, precipitates out and accumulates into a deposit. And eventually when it gets shoved up on land, then you have these volcanogenic massive sulfide systems. Again, some of them are very gold rich, but they generally are not something that the prospector would go after because the gold tends to be really small, microscopic type of size. Another type is the Witwatersrand, which is a paleoplacer. This is a placer that formed long ago, and it was a lake type system, and so there's layers that are rich in gold because there was effectively a false bedrock when it was forming. But these things have been buried and heated so much and exposed to hot sulfury water that actually the old nuggets and flakes have been somewhat remobilized and redeposited. The hot sulfury water kind of redissolved it and redeposited it in that same area where they were. So that's the Witwatersrand. There's some paleoplacers in South Dakota in the same area as the Black Hills. Another type of thing that we want to talk about is just this idea of the hot sulfury water. Now, water doesn't circulate very well through solid rock. You would think that, the water just wouldn't be able to go through it. And you're right. You basically need either very porous rock, the water can circulate through a little bit. That happens in some of the Carlin deposits. Or you have to have a fault zone or some shear zone or some other break in the rock. Sometimes you can get this with contacts of two different rocks that come together. The space between them is a conduit that hot water can flow in. So faults and contacts are really important to the prospector because they provide the conduit for these solutions that have gold in them to circulate. And then when they circulate, they deposit their gold. Basically, the hot solutions suck up gold from the traces of gold that are in surrounding rock and bring it to these fault zones or other zones where the water can circulate. And as the water moves up or moves through that area, if it cools or if the pressure is released, or if it encounters some other special minerals, it can release the gold. And what happens if the pressure is released, the water will, because it's 400 or 500 degrees or more, will boil. And when the water boils, it releases the gold suddenly. And so you get microscopic types of gold particles. And the Carlin systems, they're like that. That's why they have microscopic gold, is because a lot of times it's associated with boiling textures, boiling type deposits where the material came up, it boiled, and the gold was suddenly dropped out. Prospectors are interested in deposits that form over longer periods of time, that literally it can take a longer period, and as the gold is deposited slowly over a long period of time, it can have a chance to grow coarser and coarser and bigger pieces. Now, like I say, we talked about pockets and where to look for pockets. That's an important thing. And with gold depositing in veins, there's certain places where it is most likely to form. And one of these is we call iron formations or iron crossings. As the solutions cross a zone that is rich in iron minerals, a lot of times the gold will drop out. Basically, the gold comes out of the solution and the iron goes in, and so you'll get an area where the vein or fault or whatever that's forming crosses over some iron mineralization, and you'll get a rich pocket of coarse gold there. Other places happen where the vein kind of bends, and this can cause pressure changes or temperature changes, and the gold can deposit that way. Sometimes where the vein will splay and split into a bunch of smaller veinlets is a place where gold can deposit, and you can get these rich pockets of gold. So all in all, rich pockets are really important to prospectors, and you want to know where to look. In all honesty, the places that you want to look the most for coarse gold are places that have produced some, at least in that region, in the past. And so districts in Nevada that have produced some coarse gold, like Battle Mountain or Manhattan, some of the other places, those are great places to look for placer gold. Some of the area up toward Rye Patch, there's places where there were veins that were found that were rich in coarse gold, and those have been really productive. Another important thing to remember about these hot solutions that deposit the gold in these rich pockets is that the solutions that form veins and other deposits that we're used to seeing aren't always the same from start to finish. In other words, the nature of these solutions changes over time. It's very common in a lot of quartz veins that the first solutions, the early solutions, are quartz rich and gold poor. And a lot of near barren quartz veins, they maybe never went beyond this. The solutions eventually change and become more sulfur rich, and that's when you may get pyrite or galena or chalcopyrite or arsenopyrite, other sulfide minerals being deposited in a quartz vein. And then finally, the normal chain of events is that after the quartz rich gold poor, after the sulfides, which have a little more gold in them but not much, sometimes the sulfides are silver rich, and finally the last stage of all is the gold deposition stage. It's actually something that happens at the end of the life of these systems, is that the most gold-rich solutions that deposit these pockets, deposit these rich areas of gold in quartz, these come last. And so it's very common that when you do see specimens of rich gold quartz, that either the gold is mostly in the center, so you have like a vein and there's a line of gold down the center, or you have a line of gold down the walls, one wall or the other, sometimes both, but usually one wall or the other. And this is because at the very end, when most of the fault vein, the open space, has been already filled with quartz and sulfides and other minerals, the last thing that can, as the gold-bearing solutions come up, most of the other way is blocked. It can't get through. And so it goes in the last openings, which include these walls, or down the center if there's opening down the center. Sometimes you get a situation where it's completely blocked. That there's no opening either in the center or along the walls, and the gold will have to, if it's there, have to find an alternative way to get out. And what happens with that is there'll often be secondary, if there's a main fault where the vein forms, there'll often be secondary systems, secondary faults that form out to one side or the other. And so in a contact zone or a fault zone, you may have a vein, and there may be relatively limited amounts of quartz, relatively limited amounts of gold in the quartz, but off to the side, maybe 50 or 100, sometimes even 300 feet away, may be one of these parallel systems that has rich gold deposited by the very end solutions that were coming through. It couldn't find a way up through the main fault zone, so it had to come up in one of these secondary shear zones and other systems that are away from the actual vein itself. When I was in Australia, one of the places that I found some gold, there was a big quartz vein on one side, and there was no gold in the quartz. But off 50 or 100 feet parallel were a bunch of nuggets. In fact, the first guy who found that spot found over 30 ounces of gold. Even when I was there, I think I got about 1/4 of an ounce of gold, just crumbing and getting the last little bits that were still left behind. So this is another thing to remember when you're talking about how these rich pockets form, is that it's the last stage of the process that has the bulk of the gold. So just to summarize, there's a lot of different kinds of geologic systems. We've talked about some of them, epithermal type systems and orogenic or mother lode. The orogenic type is what prospectors used to call mesothermal. And that name was changed by geologists and scientists about 20 years ago. So if you remember or have seen the word mesothermal, well, that's your orogenic type of system. So we have the epithermal, the orogenic, and we have some others, but those two are the most common that prospectors will be looking at to find rich pockets of gold. And I hope that you've learned something from this video. If you're interested in learning more about the geology of prospecting, the geology of gold deposits, how gold deposits form, and that whole thing, check out my book. I've got a book that's available on Amazon that's an encyclopedia of prospecting and has all kinds of information. I've also got a web page at Nevada Outback Gems. You can find information on there that's about prospecting and where to go, where to look for gold. And then also be sure, if you like this video, be sure to subscribe to my channel and to hit the notification bell, and YouTube will let you know when I come out with new videos, because I've got a whole bunch of different videos planned, a lot of things to teach you how to be more successful as a prospector and how to go out and find your own gold. So thanks a lot, and best of luck to you in all your prospecting adventures. And if you're interested in finding out more about prospecting for gold and finding your own gold, check out my book, Fistful of Gold. It has a whole lot of information about prospecting. Basically, it's an encyclopedia. There's more than 350 pages of information here, well illustrated with pictures and all sorts of things, and just basically everything you need to know to be successful as a prospector. It's all about panning, sluicing, metal detecting, dry washing, the geology of gold, how to do research. Anyway, it's all in here in my book, Fistful of Gold, and it's available now on Amazon. So if you go to Amazon and just enter Fistful of Gold by Chris Ralph, you'll find it. I guarantee it'll come up. And then also, I have a free webpage that I'd love to have you check out. We've got all kinds of information there about locations to prospect for gold, uh, information about adventures and things like that, how to find your own gold. It kind of goes along with the book, but it's a free webpage, and that can be found at nevadaoutbackgems.com/prospect/chrisprospect.htm. That's the URL for it. And if you like this presentation, finally, and you want to keep learning about finding your own gold and you want to see more, then please subscribe and click the notification bell. I've got lots more gold, silver, and gemstone videos coming, both in slide presentations and live action videos out in the field. So click the subscribe button and tick that notification bell, and YouTube will let you know when I publish new stuff. And be sure to also hit the like button, and feel free to ask any comment or ask any questions or make any comments you'd like. I will try my very best to answer your questions in the comment section on the video. So very good, and thanks a lot, and we'll see you again next time.